Hey folks, Farmer Mike here hanging out at the tavern. I was talking to a friend of mine this morning about where the Supreme Court has led us and where we're going from here. And first of all, uh, we're going to discuss a few things quickly. Obviously, originalism, uh, the Supreme Court, and representation, oddly enough. So, there's a significant portion of the population that feels that the Constitution does not represent them. And considering that it was written in 1780s by a bunch of old white dudes and was passed by a bunch of old white dudes and does not have any representation, really. I mean, do you think the 3/5 clause was meant to actually represent the enslaved labor force? No. So you have the enslaved labor force that's not representative. You have women not represented, and you have non-property owning poor whites not being represented. So if you fit into any of those three categories, descendants of enslaved labor, descendants of, or I guess women, we're all descended from women, or non-property owning white dude, yeah, it wasn't written for you. So, uh, I can agree with those people that say that it doesn't represent them. I understand that. I get it. That is a totally valid argument. Not the argument that I'm here to make today. We'll get into that hopefully in a future uh, either video or written form or something. Anyway, when we're talking about the Supreme Court and where we're going from here, on the next term we have North Carolina election laws. Um, the state's ability to set up their election laws is clearly stated in the Constitution, yada, yada, yada. Then there's this other thing called the 10th Amendment. Y'all been lecturing ad nauseum on the 10th Amendment since, I don't know, 2 minutes after the Constitution was signed. Really. Uh, on and on. States' rights, states' rights, states' rights, blah, 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 blah. And it's all about states' rights until you think you get a better deal from the federal government. And I say that in regards to the Fugitive Slave Act, in which southern states saw every ability to restrict their slaves from running away to the north, and in violation of whatever the northern state law said, the federal government said, you got to return those slaves. All right. There's nothing in the Constitution about that. It was a federal Fugitive Slave Act. And it would have really been ruled under originalistic terms as a violation of the 10th Amendment. What we have going on right now in North Carolina, I believe, is also a direct violation of the 10th Amendment, because the Constitution says states set up the way they do elections, yada, yada, yada. There's been some shady gerrymandering going on in North Carolina. Looking at you, Ohio, you have the same issue going on. Other states have the same issue going on. They gerrymander house by house to basically get the most Republican representatives that they can get. And that also leads to the most Republican electors that they can get. And that's the way the game is played. Right or wrong, I don't agree with it. We got to come up with a better solution. But in the meantime, North Carolina tried to gerrymander the hell out of their districts, just like Ohio does, just like every other state does, really. And there was a lawsuit, went to the state Supreme Court eventually. North Carolina State Supreme Court said, yeah, this isn't cool. You can't do this. And then they took a state issue to the federal government and the federal Supreme Court. Now, why did they do that? Why did one of the most states' rights advocate people, states, go to the federal government? Because they know what ruling they're going to get. The Supreme Court right now has an issue with politics. And the issue is that you used to not know exactly what the ruling was going to be. But you can draw this ruling up. You already know it. You don't need to hear the arguments. Nobody needs to read the briefs. You already know what it's going to be. They're going to rule in favor of the gerrymander. And they're doing that because they were sent there to do that. And there's a couple ironies at work here. One, I've already pointed out, is the states' rights versus federal government argument. Two is the fact that those justices that claim to be religious, that claim to be, they put their hand on the Bible. And no, I'm not even going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about that in another episode. We'll get into that more in another episode. But what we have here is originalism until it doesn't work in our favor. And we've seen this in other things. All right. Tucker Carlson, a while back, went on just rabid, crazy about China buying all this farmland, and President Biden needs to do something about it, and the federal government needs to do something about this. If you look, the state that has the most property owned by a foreign entity is Texas. That's right. Texas has sold the most property to Chinese interests. Now, why would Tucker Carlson go on and say that the federal government needs to handle this? Texas is fully capable of handling that. Fully capable. Governor Abbott, y'all love Governor Abbott. He can shut down the southern border. Why can't he stop his people from selling their farmland to Chinese interests? None of you batted an eye. You just kept pounding the podium. Federal government's got to do something. Federal government's got to do something. It's kind of interesting dynamic, isn't it? To bring it back to the Constitution for a minute, we need to keep in mind that, and we're going to steal a line here from, I know he's out of favor right now, but like Captain Jack Sparrow said, there are more guidelines than actual rules. If we look at them as guidelines, because you can't govern a nation this size with this many people and this many diverse interests with basically what would amount to 2 pieces of paper. It's not going to happen, people. We need to come up with some long-term solutions, and we need some leadership, and we're not getting either one. And that's really all I came to say.